Good evening, everyone. You are in the right place if you're looking for the webinar on Indigenous women and feminism. We will be starting shortly, just giving people enough time to get on and get connected. Good evening, everyone. Just starting in a few minutes, letting folks get on and get connected. Folks who are both watching on Facebook Live and also on the webinar itself. So we're just giving people a little time to get started, but we'll be starting shortly. Good evening. We will be starting here in about 1 minute, but you are in the right place for the webinar for around Indigenous women and feminism. We'll be starting here shortly. All right, I think we're ready to get started. Good evening, everyone. Fasin. Buenos noches. All of the good things. So welcome. Bienvenidos. We are going to get started in this webinar. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us here at the Indigenous Environmental Network in this webinar with Indigenous women to talk about feminism and returning the matriarchy. And we're going to go through a couple of logistical pieces as we get started and make a couple of announcements, and then we're going to open with a prayer. So I would like to let people know that we are having this translated into Spanish, and it's important for us to think about connecting with Indigenous women, North and South, and language justice is an important part of that. So this is an important moment for us to do this webinar in 2 languages. And I would like to invite Catalina to share this with us, share some logistics with us.
Hola, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Catalina y acá también está Silvia. Vamos a estar interpretando el día de hoy del inglés al español y el español a inglés. So hello everyone, good evening. My name is Catalina and here also is Silvia. The both of us are going to be interpreting from English to Spanish and Spanish to English. Para las personas que están en el Zoom en este momento, en unos momentos vamos a activar la interpretación. En ese momento en que la activemos, pueden ir a un globo en la parte inferior de la pantalla, van a hacer clic en el globo y seleccionar español. Si se unieron por tablet o por teléfono, van a buscar los 3 puntos donde dice más. Ahí van a seleccionar interpretación de idiomas, después escogen su canal español y ponen finalizar. So for those who are in this Zoom right now, In a moment, we're going to activate interpretation. In that moment, you're going to see a globe in the bottom of the Zoom screen. You're going to click on that globe and choose English. Choose to be in the English channel if that's your language preference. For those who prefer Spanish, then we'll choose Spanish. If you join by tablet or phone, where you're going to find that option is by going through the 3 dots where it says more. Then it's going to give you an option of language interpretation. Then choose your language preference and then click done. Por último, les recomendamos que también hay una opción que dice silenciar audio original. Entonces déjenlo sin silenciarlo para poder escuchar la voz de la persona que está hablando. Van a escuchar ambas voces al mismo tiempo, pero si les está distrayendo demasiado, pueden volver a esa selección y cambiarla si es necesario. Y en las personas que estén en la transmisión en vivo, si prefieren escuchar esta transmisión en español, se va a poner en la casilla de chat en el Facebook el enlace para unirse al Zoom, porque ahí es donde van a poder escuchar esta programación en español. So the last option is also to mute original audio. We recommend to actually leave it unmuted so you can hear both the voice of the person speaking plus the interpreter. But if at any point it becomes very distracting to hear both voices, then you can go back to the globe and change your selection if needed. And for those who prefer to hear this program in Spanish, those who are on the live stream right now, there's gonna be a link put in the chat where you can come to the actual Zoom and be able to access the Spanish interpretation. Okay, Jennifer, so we can assign interpreters now. We're gonna activate the interpretation now. Vamos a activar ahora la interpretación. So Jennifer, assign Silvia interpreter and Catalina Nieto interpreter. And then once everybody sees the globe, make sure you select your channel. Entonces, una vez que salga el globito,
So thank you, everyone. Are we going to test or are we just going to go forward? Good. I'm going to pass on to Simone, who's going to introduce someone special for us.
Yes, thank you, Benishi. Good evening, everyone. I'd first like to start us off by introducing the woman who's gonna open us up and start us off with a prayer. Eva Blake is an IEN team member and used to be our intern back in the day, and she's back, which I think is a beautiful thing. It's been 20 years and we're so happy to have her back. She belongs to the Asanet band of the Wampanoag Nation of Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and she's our philanthropic relations manager here at the Indigenous Environmental Network. She was born and raised in her native homelands. She continues to learn and practice the cultural and spiritual traditions of her people as a community leader towards cultivating an Indigenous just transition. Mother of 2 beautiful Afro-Indigenous children, Eva serves her community as a language instructor for the Language Reclamation Project and an advisory council member of the Massachusetts Center for Native American Awareness. So thank you so much, Eva, for starting us off right, and I'm going to turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Abatash Simone, right? Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Wini wana kwami na tonkwasta ka wami ni tompak kuni piamu. Natasuis Eva asa non pakuinis ka nuwapanam. Nutomas asanet ka natai quinziat Massachusetts. Just saying good evening to everyone, introducing myself in my native language, Wampanoag, or Wampanoag Tuwaonk, which means the Wampanoag language. I am from the Assonet Band, as you mentioned, and I'm going to say a prayer called Pion Tamuonk Wachi Asiach Kwampa Kish, which means a prayer for every time. And it was written by Jessie Little Doe Baird, who is a master linguist and founder of the Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project. I did make a few additions. This is our standard prayer that we say before every lesson, before every meeting, before every time. But for this special occasion, I thought I would add a little more to it. So forgive me, Jessie, if I make any mistakes. So, and here we go. So Namanatum Masakinwi Kahwami ni Kwanahachi, my great creator and all ancestors. Katapa tato mawanamu, wachi wami nikonahachi. Thank you all for all our ancestors. Katapa tato mawanamu, wachi watuka saniyaki. We thank you very much for Mother Earth. Katapa tato mawanamu, wachi kisak ka anakwasak. I'm trying to go slow also for interpretation, but we thank you all for the sky and the stars. Tapa tato mawanamu wachini pawas ka nutyawash. We thank you for the sun and the fires. Tapa tato mawanamu wachi wapanash. We thank you for the winds. Katapa tata mawanamu wachi sipuash ka katahanash. We thank you for the rivers and the oceans. Katapa tata mawanamu wachi wampananat, tawananat, makwa matananat ka nanamanat. We thank you for the spirit of the east, the spirit of the south, the spirit of the west, and the spirit of the north. Tapa tata mawanamu wachi wami nuainak, wanithyawonk, ka wachi wami natonkwasak. We thank you for all the beauty that surrounds us and for all our relations. Ahapai nanana pasamash manat, wachi nitashkahi wami awa asak, mahchanak asa onkwamamu wonkanat. We humbly ask you, Creator, to heal all creatures who are sick or in pain. Manat nitashkahi natashayuwank kapiyanta mawash. Creator, I pray of you to heal my family. Kapiyanta mawash ananamanian namanat wipi winikak ka asinat wipi sampwak. I pray of you to help us to see only what is good and to do what is right. Ananamanian napipi namanataman nish kikyakish. Help us to choose for ourselves those things that are healthy. Pish kapi mityon wonkanak manakonsuak. Let our descendants be strong. Anach. Let it be so. Or in other words, amen or ashe. And I will pass it back. Thank you, Katab Tanamu, to Benishi to get us started today. Thank you.
Senle. Thank you all. My name is Benishi Albert. I'm Yuchi and Anishinaabe. I make my home in my father's home community in Oklahoma, and I'm part of the Indigenous Environmental Network. I work as the movement building coordinator, and it's an honor to be here with everyone today. And just wanting to share a bit about this series and what we're trying to do. You know, we have some work that we have been holding, Simone and myself and other women who are part of the organization, to not only lift up the work of Indigenous women in the work that we do around protecting our environment, protecting the communities, protecting our families and our homelands, but also around what does it mean to hold that space as women and as Indigenous women, um, and um, and around feminism and what does that mean to us, and not just that, but what are the things that we're trying to undo and deconstruct from colonial influences into our culture and lifeways, and things that have caused destruction in our family structures and our culture and our homelands and our water, and the role that women have held at holding that and holding that line. And so, this that's part of what we wanted to do this discussion series, is to talk about and lift up some of the issues that we have been experiencing as we've been navigating this work over the last couple of years, and wanted to share that discussion nationally and internationally. And so, thank you. Simone?
Okay, good evening, everyone. Chinodanikwe, Indigenous, Misquagami Bizaga Iganing, and Donjiba. My name is Simone Senegals, and I am from the Red Lake Nation here in northern Minnesota. And I work at the Indigenous Environmental Network, where I've served a variety of duties in the last 20 years, currently on the leadership team and with Ogimakwewiwen, Indigenous Women's Leadership. It's my great pleasure to kick off this first of a series of webinars by the Indigenous Environmental Network on this very important topic of Indigenous feminisms. I was trying to think of how I was going to introduce this incredibly important topic with all of these illustrious women on here, and I got stuck. I was thinking it's a lot, right? To try to cover so much and to try to bring some justice to this very important topic. And suddenly this woman who I know, her smile popped into my mind, and I started thinking about her smile. I started thinking about who she was as a mother. She's an athlete. She's an artist, and I started thinking about. It went from her smile to thinking about all the women that I laughed with, sat around, laughed with, teased with, and who have shaped me into the woman that I am today. And thinking about who we are as Indigenous women. We cry together, we laugh together, we protect one another, we support one another. Sometimes we harm one another. And we heal together, we console each other, we challenge each other, we hold each other accountable, and we love each other. And we do all of this in the face of tremendous current and historical oppression, colonization, genocide, violence, patriarchy, and even internalizing patriarchy within our own traditions, ceremonies, and mindsets. And still here we are. And here are our ancestors, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, the ones who have gone, our current selves, and the ones who are coming into the future. And so that is who our panelists are. And our panelists are going to share some of their own experiences, their learned experiences through their personal lives, their professions, and all of the things that they've learned. And share with us how they are doing all of this work that Indigenous women have taken up, protecting our communities, protecting our Mother Earth, our waters, taking care of our children, being fierce, being loving, being vulnerable, and all of that. And so I'm just beyond honored and humbled to be able to introduce this panel and turn it over to them. So thank you so much, and I'll turn it to Ine now.
I want to just take a moment to introduce our moderator. We have invited a longtime compañera of mine, all of ours really, but Ine Bigay. And, you know, she's an organizer, trainer, facilitator, mama, badass, you know, all of those. And we've invited her to help moderate this discussion for us. And also has plenty enough to say on her own around this topic, but felt like she would be good to help us hold this space. So I would like to um, welcome Ine. So thank you.
Yeah, Masicho Benishi. I yet aro van Winzi Tati ni Nishlant oj ini bashish chin do ashin dashanella akta denestan Nishla aro shoji ine Peter Oji. So I'm Navajo and Dana Atam, and I also am married into the Gwich'in Nation and live here in Alaska on my relatives' lands of the Dene peoples of the Lower Tanana, also known as Fairbanks. And I'm the executive director of Native Movement, and just love this, looking at this group of panelists. I'm just in awe of them, and I'm going to stop talking because I want to hear from them, really. This is like sitting with a bunch of my relatives, and I'll try to keep it like slow. I know we're doing interpretation, but I get so excited to dive into this discussion, as I know many of the panelists are excited to dive in. We could probably spend hours over tea or coffee or whatnot, just like vibing on a lot of this conversation. And so I have the great honor of introducing each of our panelists. And in our first introductory, as you do your introduction, I'm going to ask each of you to answer this question of what is your relationship to feminism? As an Indigenous person, what is your relationship to feminism? Do you consider yourself a feminist, an Indigenous feminist? It's interesting that I'm moderating this panel because about over 10 years ago, I was invited to speak at a feminist class. And I came into that class and I told all these students, I'm not a feminist. And so I've had this wave of a relationship, like up and down cycles of a relationship with that word feminism. And as I know many of you have had as well. And so as you introduce yourselves and talk about your work, if you could tell us what your relationship is with feminism, that would be great. And I'm going to start our panel discussion off with Jahan Giron, who is Dene Black from the Navajo Nation, and also a longtime friend who I've known from our Stanford University days. She's the former executive director of Black Mesa Water Coalition. And she was she was a key convener and organizer of the first Indigenous feminist organizing school that happened last year. So Jahan, please tell us more.
All right, everybody get ready. Just kidding. I'm gonna try to keep it to 7 minutes and I'll time myself too, even before that, so we can have a discussion together. But yat everybody, she'e Jahan, yinishya, twilij eatni nishle, donna kaisij in the bashish chin, ashe dashe donna kaisij in the dashanella. So yes, my name is Jahan Giron. I live here in northern Arizona. I live in the border town of Flagstaff. I'm currently, as Ine said, I was a former executive director of Black Mesa Water Coalition and transitioned out of that last year. So this year I was awarded the Changemaker Fellowship from the NDN Collective. So I've been taking this whole year to not work. And I would say like the biggest challenge is to not feel guilty for doing things that I want to do for myself. And that's feminism. Part of it anyway. So the work that I have done over the past 15 years, though, is around environmental justice and climate justice. And that's how I know a lot of these folks on the call. Former staff person of IEN as well. So that, I mean, I feel like that amount of work for me and for probably a lot of us on the call is just like naturally what we do. Because like, at least for like, I mean, for us Deneb people, it's not only like, oh, we are reflections of Mother Earth, which we are, but it's also the ability to take care of the land, of the water, of the air, of our people. So I feel like, you know, a lot of times when people ask me, why did you get into that line of work as opposed to, you know, whatever else, I just felt that's what I do. That's what I'm supposed to do. And that's part of that like natural calling. I too, well, actually, I think ever since I was little, I was okay mostly with calling myself a feminist. Like in this whole spring cleaning session of, you know, the pandemic, I found like this old report that I wrote on like the feminine mystique when I was like a freshman in high school or something like that. So I was cool to call myself a
Jahan?
Did Jahan freeze for everybody else?
I understand. Oh no,
Oh,
am I
okay.
back yet?
You're back. You're back.
Okay, sorry. What's the last part you heard?
The feminist mystique, and you were okay with calling yourself a feminist.
Right. But I understand how a lot of people are not, you know, especially in Indigenous communities. I understand that it's triggering to people because, you know, you have this image of you're going to be assimilated into the values of white society and, you know, what those negative things. So I understand it. But I also think, you know, now is the time for us to not worry about what words we're using, you know, as long as we understand together what we're about. So, um, especially in 2017, I participated in a feminist organizing school by Grassroots Global Justice Alliance. And I think that just further solidified to me that I feel great calling myself a feminist and uplifting, you know, kind of general feminist issues. But it also made me realize that there is the Indigenous voice and perspective that is missing from this larger dialogue of feminism. And maybe just to talk about what I think is unique about Indigenous feminism. I think we definitely have key issues that are unique, you know, such as murder and missing Indigenous women, you know, and disproportionate abuse and violence against Indigenous women. I think we also have kind of key responsibilities that we hold that are different, like our responsibility to Mother Earth and our homelands and protecting those places and speaking on behalf of those places. And then, of course, I think there's the uniqueness of colonization, you know, that um, we have it in our history. And I'm only talking about one generation ago, 2 generations ago, 3 generations ago, in which our matriarchal systems were actually working and in place, you know, and that achieved um, a respect and autonomy and power of women and basically non-cis men that today's kind of larger feminist is still trying to get, you know, and we had that. So in this same time that they were trying to ask for the right to vote or something like that, on our side, all of these powers were being taken from us, you know, so that is hugely different. Another thing that our Indigenous way of life teaches us is just the diversity of feminisms, you know, like it's not like, oh, Indigenous people experience all these things the same, but that as we dig into each of our cultures, feminism, like everything else, is really about decolonizing and reclaiming those parts of our culture that were lost through colonization. And that includes the power of women, the role of women, and autonomy of women, as well as other non-gender conforming people. So, and then of course, along with that, the last thing I'll say for now um, is a real challenge. Then it's another additional challenging layer of challenging tradition. Okay, you know what I'm saying? Like, because if we're fighting for decolonization, it's so hard to like look at our ceremonies and say, I think that there's a patriarchal level on this ceremony, or I think that there's a patriarchal level on this practice that, you know, people, Navajo people, for example, have a hard time electing a Navajo leader, woman leader, because they say, oh, that's not the woman's place to be in the front like that. And that ain't Navajo. that's patriarchy using quote unquote tradition to uphold patriarchy. So I think that's another unique like knot that as Indigenous people we really have to untangle. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Stop on the juicy one. You stop on the juicy one.
Like,
oh, mic drop. We know we all want to get into that and hear more. So let's hear from Linda Black Elk. It's my great honor to introduce you, Linda. She's Duka and Katoa. I'm descendant. Catawba descendant. She's another person that I just have so much admiration for. She's an ethnobotanist, food sovereignty activist, a protector, and a practitioner of plant medicines and our traditional foods. And I'm thrilled to hear from you, as I'm sure everyone in Facebook world and Zoom world is, on what is your relationship to feminism, and tell us more about yourself, Linda.
So, Linda he hakasapa e machiapi, kataba na duka oyate e mataha, but tashpa oju elwati. So I am Linda Black Elk, and I am a Duka and a descendant of the Catawba people. But I'm coming to you right now from the occupied lands of the Oceti Shakowee, which are the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota people, and also the Mandan people were once here and are still here and thriving and super strong. And I want to give super props to them for this beautiful land that they have maintained for so long and had a relationship with for so long. I am an ethnobotanist, and I guess, that's a strange term because it's an academic term, but I don't like the word herbalist, especially for myself as an Indigenous woman. So I tend to use that term, ethnobotanist. When it comes to feminism, I have never, ever, I think in my whole life, called myself that. But I do realize that I was raised by very strong women. And so I think I have been described as an Indigenous feminist, but I have never really called myself that. I tend to think that Indigenous feminism is all about respecting whatever empowers women, whatever they feel empowers them. That's not my choice. And so I think the reason I hadn't called myself a feminist is because I was raised around a lot of non-Indigenous women who, when I told them, I own the ger, I own the home, I get to create life when I want to. Someday at the time when I was talking about this, I said, oh my gosh, I get to create life. I get to have children someday. I would say things like, I'm the seed keeper, I'm the medicine maker. And these white feminists would say, that's not feminism, that's oppression. And I was dismayed. I was like, well, then I'm not a feminist, because I feel super empowered and proud and happy to get to do those things and to say that I own the home. That whole construct is mine. That whole structure is mine. I keep the seeds which sustain the people, and just saying those things, like the weight of it, but the power of it gives me goosebumps just talking about that. And so, I really look at those things like that's what Indigenous feminism is to me. And so now I think I can say that and call myself that. And I love the fact, I tend to not really get into a lot of theory, and I do read some papers, but it's just I'm not a very good academic. Even though I'm an academic, I'm not a very good one. And so I tend to not think about definitions too much, but I love the fact that this webinar was called Indigenous Feminisms. you know, plural, because that absolutely is what that means to me. It's all about, you know, whatever it means to you and what empowers you, and however I can, whatever I can do to lift you up and make sure that you are allowed to continue with your journey of empowerment. Now, as a person who works with sacred plant medicine, I have been told over and over that, you know, and I make medicine for people, okay? But I realized one day, and Jihan, something you were saying really rang a bell with me. I realized one day, not very long ago, that I never make medicine for myself, right? I will sit there and I will be sick and I will be tired and I will like be stressed out, and I will just say, people will be coming at me and I'm like, yes, 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 yes. Oh, sure, I'll do that. Yes. But I will not do anything for myself. And I finally had to stand up and say, you know what? I need to make some medicine for myself. You know what? 5-year-old crazy child, you came from my womb and I love you, but I need a few minutes. Leave this room right now. I realized that I had to take care of myself, and that is feminism as well. And, you know, I felt very empowered once one day I made medicine for myself when I was not feeling well. And I realized that I do not practice self-care. You know, we talk about that word, and I think within the realm of especially Western or maybe white feminism, I don't mean to say that if that's an incorrect term to use, but I feel like that term means like bubble baths and like, you know what I mean? I think it has come to mean something that it doesn't mean to me. For me, self-care is taking care of myself, making sure that I am on a healing journey so that I can take care of the people around me, allowing others to take care of me. You know, that is, I feel very empowered by knowing that I can do that at this stage of my life. And I didn't always. So now I try to talk to women and, you know, non-gender conforming friends of mine and tell them, you know, that's what empowers me, is realizing that I can take time for myself. Let's see. I guess that's probably all I have to say. I know I didn't take up the full 7 minutes, and I'm happy to give that to my sisters who are on here. But yeah, I'm happy to answer other questions later too.
Oh, thanks, Linda. I think you were actually right on time.
Okay. Those full 7 minutes.
And I just want to mention to folks too, if you've got questions as you're hearing panelists speak, if you've got questions that you want to hear them speak on, please write them in the chat, the Zoom chat, or even comment on Facebook, the Facebook stream, and we will get those questions. And we're going to dive into some juicy dialogue together after we do some of these intros. And so back to intros, it's really, really, really honored to be able to introduce Sandra Moran. Welcome, and she is, among many other things, one of the first elected openly lesbian members of Guatemala in the history of Guatemala, and was a deputy of the Congress of the Republic of Guatemala from 2016 to 2020. She's been a defender of LGBTIQ+ rights and women's human rights. And we are so honored to have you on this panel, Sandra.
Thank you so much. And I just want to first say that it is a real honor for me to be here. And I'm so grateful for the invitation, because it allows me to get to know women that are so powerful from the indigenous peoples of the North. We know each other very little. And so thank you so much for this great opportunity. So first of all, I want to tell you that Guatemala is a country with 25 languages, 22 languages that are Mayan languages. Garifuna language that is from Afro-descendants, and Xinca language that comes from the indigenous peoples of Mexico. And also the official language is, of course, the Spanish, which is the language that was imposed on all of us. And I just also want to tell you that we are a country like other countries, that there have been policies to convert indigenous peoples and Guatemala, which is a plurinational country, into a country that is based on the idea of one nation. This idea of the national identity was promoted in 1871 by a liberal revolution. And from then, the policies and the politics of mixing people have been very strong. But we're a very strong country. Mayan people are present. Mayan women are visible. There is a life culture that is present. And many of us who were born with a loss of identity, we are looking for our indigenous roots. And this is part of the political struggles that our peoples are having. We're trying to look for these indigenous roots deep, that have 500 years of being in resistance, and they're permanent. They are trying to recover identity, language, history, fabric. It's part of the struggles that we have nowadays. And in terms of feminism, well, I am a feminist, and yes, we have a lot of indigenous women who do feminist actions, but they don't call themselves feminists. We also have the development of community feminism that has roots in the communities, in the towns, and the indigenous women have developed indigenous feminism, and they talk about the patriarchy that is rooted in the tradition and the cultures of these indigenous communities, but that came from colonization. So we are talking about how this patriarchal condition is generating actions against half of the population, which is women. So we also have the development of Mayan women who do call themselves feminists and who contribute to the discussion of feminism in Guatemala, and feminist decolonial feminism, which is learned from also Afro-descendant feminists. So we do have several sources of feminist thought, and we are enriching as we go, because that is what is really important about this feminist construction. It is not something that is static. It is something that is alive. It is a theory, a way of life, a reading of the reality from the different points of views and gazes and worldviews. And this element of the worldview, cosmovision, it's a contribution that is key for the growth of feminism throughout the whole world. Indigenous women are contributing with different worldviews and cosmovision and their relationship with the cosmos. And the life of human beings and living beings. So they have a cosmogonic gaze that comes from the contributions of indigenous women, and that is really key to articulate the struggles for the defense of our bodies, our life, but also the defense of Mother Earth and also the other living beings with which we are living. And that is one of the big contributions that I'm very thankful for, that comes from our sisterhood. And I am a feminist. Yes, we've been part of the feminist constructions in Guatemala and in Mesoamerica, and a dialogue with the sisters, indigenous sisters in the south of the continent that we are talking about the community feminism, the feminism rooted in the towns and daily life of the communities. And another thing that I want to say is that feminism, the community feminism, indigenous feminism, also brings up to the discussion not only rights, not only cases from individual persons, but also collective community views and perspectives. This is one of the other big contributions, because in terms of human rights, we have individual rights, but collective rights are those rights that talk about communities and diversity. And this is why, and this is a big contribution that indigenous women have made, or people of diverse genders have made to feminism. So these are the contributions, and I'm very, very thankful for the work that IN is doing regarding this discussion, dialogue about indigenous feminism and the contributions of indigenous women from everywhere in the Americas and all other parts of the world. Thank you so much.
Gracias, Sandra. Thank you. We're just hearing so many juicy bits from this group in terms of, like, you know, individual versus collective rights, and some of what makes indigenous feminism unique. And for those that are just joining in, maybe you've missed some really good things. You've got to see the recording if you missed anything earlier. But I want to get to there. I see some questions in the Q&A. So again, if you're on Zoom, put those questions in the Q&A bar. And then if you're on Facebook, we've got people monitoring that, and hopefully we'll have some time to dive into some of those questions. I want to introduce Charlene Akpik. I know her as Akpik Apuk, who is Inupiaq from Alaska, and is the gender justice organizer for Native Movement, and has been doing a lot of work in the protection of missing and murdered Indigenous women, and also gender justice outside of the binary, really advocating around the spectrum of gender justice and men's roles. She's also a PhD currently in, she's working on her PhD in Indigenous studies. So I'm always honored to introduce Akpik.
Ayana. Bubanga Charlene Apuk, Inupiaq Siska Akpik, Chinik Mu Gurunga, Chirvik Mu Gurunga, Akaga Sandra Baby Lu Apuk, Evan Luklan, Native Movement Me, Denina Lands Me. So that's my Inupiaq introduction. My name is Charlene Apuk, and my Inupiaq name is Akpik, which is a salmonberry or a cloudberry. It also means to be confident. My family is from Gullivan and White Mountain, which are villages of only 200 people. My mother, Sandra Baby Lu Apuk, and I have a son. His name is Evan Luklan. He's 5. And I work here on Denina lands for Native Movement. It's really hard for me not to respond to all of the beautiful feedback and ideas that everyone has shared so far, so I'm trying to stay focused. And I just want to first also express a lot of gratitude to be in this space with so many amazing people, and I could just sit back and listen for hours. But you know, the question about what is your relationship to Indigenous feminism, and do you call yourself a feminist? And I do. You know, I understand myself, my existence is testimony to the living ways of Indigenous feminism, and our ancestors got us here today. My ancestors got me here today through our way of being. And to me, that is Indigenous feminism. And as touched on a little bit, you know, in so many ways, colonization has tried to kill us. They've tried, you know, colonization has tried to prevent my sheer existence in so many ways through life. And again, that existence is our resistance. And for me, Indigenous feminism has given me the space to grow and to learn and to become. And it's been a pathway, and I think it will continue to be throughout my life. But it's given me that space to understand, you know, on a very spiritual level, our divine selves from within, and to honor my highest self, and to understand what it means to be a higher being, to be a creator, to be a warrior, to be a healer. And so for me, Indigenous feminism also provides a way of understanding health and well-being. I have a background as a researcher, so I'm kind of nerdy, and I love theory, and I love learning all in so many different ways. I've been very inspired, you know, along my pathway. Black feminism has been incredibly inspirational, and I really want to honor all the Black feminists that have contributed to so much of our learning. But Indigenous feminism allowed me to contextualize my life and my being and my people's existence in a way that was very meaningful and very healing. And when we unpack the impacts from colonization, that's powerful. But then where do we look? And to me, looking to our culture for understanding, finding that balance amongst the spectrum of genders is what I look to in a way to help realize our vision for health and well-being. So it informs, Indigenous feminism really informs, to me, a life way for our people that is really powerful. And so those are kind of my, you know, and I think it's really important as well, as Ine mentioned, the whole spectrum of genders and the roles of men in our community. I feel like Indigenous feminism offers that in a unique way, a place of belonging for everybody that we always had, and that we might need to relearn or come to again. And so those are, you know, and an example of that I often like to share is in my Inupiaq language, we don't have gender pronouns. And so I do identify with they, them in honor of my Indigenous knowledge and way of being, in another way, a bigger way of understanding, like Sandra was saying, ourselves in the cosmos. And that isn't limited to a construct of English pronouns. But I see my post-it, and I will honor our time because I know there's so much more to discuss, and Koyana, which means thank you.
Thank you. So many juicy bits. Again, this panel, of course, is going to be offering so much beauty to this conversation. I want to dive into a question that we've kind of had in here a little bit. I'm trying to monitor the different places that questions are coming in. One of the questions we'll start with is how do you put Indigenous feminism into practice? You know, and what are maybe in practice, what are the challenges, and what are the beauties or the blessings of Indigenous feminism in practice? And I'm just gonna see who maybe has some response here. Not everybody has to respond or have a dialogue. But if someone's ready to say, oh, Linda, I see you off mute.
I can definitely talk a little bit about that, I think. And I just want to say one thing, I suppose, and that is that something that I love about Indigenous feminism is the recognition that what happens to me and to my sisters as Indigenous women is intricately tied to our Mother Earth. So our mother, our first mother, that first woman, you know, she is being abused, she is being raped. And, you know, I think that, and a lot of you are so cognizant of the fact that, you know, what happens with our Mother Earth, what is being done to her, I think is so tied to what is being done with us, and tied to missing and murdered Indigenous people as well. And so I think that, you know, as Indigenous people and perhaps Indigenous feminists, we have that to offer. We have that recognition for people to see and understand that if, you know, if we are going to treat our Mother Earth this way, then it is very, you know, because we are life givers as well, it is very obvious, I think, that the next step would be for people to treat us that way as well. And so, you know, I think that there's so, we can go really far with that recognition. And so it's not necessarily, I know that that almost sounds like a really sad realization, but at least it gives us a starting point to deal with the problem. And so I think that if we are going to deal with this problem of missing and murdered Indigenous people, we have to realize how closely tied that is to the way that we treat our planet, our mother.
Thank you, Linda. Yes.
I'll add something. I think for Navajo people, I think really like it's about bringing back our matriarchal practices, which, you know, everyone knows their clans and everything, and they're like, yeah, my grandma's real strong, but that's not the same as Navajo women are the ones who not own, but kind of own the land, you know, right? Like, I think, so let's say, traditionally, if I had kids, right, and I had a daughter, my daughter would stay in my area, you know, and be part of that next generation of people who are caretaking that area, teaching about that area, making decisions about that area, and moving forward. If I had a son, then my son would go help. He would move to his married family's place, right, and help with that area. And that's been totally changed by colonization. Now, like the land has been divided. It was first given to like whoever's the oldest male in this region, which are not from there, as I just explained to you. Do you know what I mean? They were married into those places. So like the system of colonization just really flipped everything. And I think that's part of the reason why our homelands and Mother Earth are being destroyed, is because those original caretakers no longer have that role. Sure, we're there. Sure, people are still planting and herding sheep, but that power is gone. Do you know what I mean? It's the power of the individual matriarchs that are holding everything together, but not being supported by the culture or the institution of the tribe. And so I feel like that's the piece we need to bring back into addition to us already being awesome and strong and cool and wonderful and smart and creative. Like, what if our culture, our institutions, our government actually supported that, which is not the case now, you know? And I think being an environmental justice organizer, that's what I saw all the time, right? Like our tribal governments, you know, at least in our area, are men who are the ones signing these leases, who were put in the business council to sign these leases after they had gone through, you know, boarding school and assimilation practices and being taught, but, you know, that men are better than women, men are the head of everything. Then they were put into these decision-making roles, and it's always been the women who are the first ones to stand up and protect those places, you know, like at Big Mountain, like at Black Mesa, like in the fracking issue. So that's the real, I mean, that's part of what I think Indigenous feminism would do.
And you're answering some of what the questions that are coming into the chat, Jahan. You think you just answered some of that, and I'll read this question because it also ties into the question I just asked for other people, which is, what role does traditional kinship play in contemporary activities? And you talked about that, just the juxtaposition there of colonization that colonization imposes. And so this, similar to what I just said earlier, the question of, how do we put this into practice? This person asks, how can we use and apply this Indigenous feminism in academia and in the context of our community practice. So if our other panelists want to speak to how that kinship is, and yes, Sandra.
So yes. So I think it's really important that the pleasure is politicized, which are part of our traditions. For example, we have a movement that talks about recovering the tradition of the fabric. And what we are thinking is that the fabric is what they were never able to burn, because this is the way in which women, indigenous women, have transferred their cosmovision, their knowledge, and their history into the fabric. And that relationship with nature, the relationship with the history and its threats is represented that we have our own calendar, the Mayan calendar, which it's alive, it's present every single day, has a specific energy. And that energy is the one that accompanies us. And it is an energy that is also expressed in the fabrics. And this is tradition. And if this tradition is shared and it becomes a tool against colonization, against oppression, it is a tool against the system. So traditional food, for example, the way of cooking it, it's today even more important. Traditional medicine that has saved lives of thousands in a pandemic that has no medicine available for anybody. So all of that is really, we're talking about tools against the system of oppression. So it is a life struggle against patriarchy, against colonialism, against capitalism, and it will allow us to recover our roots that go deep, knowledges, histories, and it will allow us to recover the thread of history. And the last thing that I want to say is that it's really important within feminism to talk about genealogy among women. And what you have shared with us is how that genealogy, it's so present when you are introducing yourself. So you're always talking about that you are the descendants of your ancestors. And that history, that genealogy is a wonderful contribution. It's a tool, again, against the invisibility that history is trying to impose on us. Thank you.
Gracias, Sandra. That was so powerful. Akpik, do you remember the question? You probably got something.
Yeah. So what does Indigenous feminism look like practical and everyday? And there was a comment about kinship. So some of the things that come to mind is actually something that was mentioned a little earlier from Linda was, on a everyday and practical level, it means actually that we have community care, that we go beyond that self-care, and that we share our medicine with one another when they need it. And I think that that's really important to recognize that aspect beyond individuals and that communal sense of who we are. To me, it also, informs the way that I approach and understand all my relationships, not just with humans, but with animals and the land and the waters, and how I demonstrate reciprocity, I think is really important. It also means I was actually just super journaling about this last night because I was really feeling it. On a very practical level, it means to be myself unapologetically every single day, and that I'm not too much of a woman, that I'm not a shortcoming of a woman, that I am just enough just as I am. And that is still a struggle. I struggle with it every single day. But to me, that, again, that Indigenous feminism and that way of being helps guide me through that, hopefully, in a balanced way. And there's other very practical ways I see in our community up here in Alaska. It also means that our naming practices are very powerful for kinship, and those are very strong up here. And as well as we're revitalizing ceremonies and rites of passage, such as our tattooing and things like that. And so I see it emerge in different forms, but it's around the values and the, the ways that we practice Indigenous feminism. It comes through every single day in many different forms. So yeah, Koyana.
Thank you. There's a couple questions in here, and maybe one person wants to take it. Maybe a couple people want to. One of the questions here is, some Indigenous women self-identify as womanist. What are your thoughts on the differences or the similarities between feminism and womanism, and where Indigenous women may see themselves in the midst of this dialogue? So that's what is the difference between feminism and womanism, or what are the similarities? Does anybody have thoughts on that?
I just Googled womanism. I was like, what is womanism? Like, so I think I kind of just, I mean, I don't know very much about it. And if other people want to talk about it more, they can. But it seems to me like the word womanism is about a woman's natural contribution. So maybe, which seems different from mainstream feminism, kind of like what you experienced, Linda, and your story that you told earlier. So I think that's what they're seeing as the difference. Like I said earlier, to me, I don't think the word I use matters so much. I think, and I think that's just across our movements and everything, is like the battle over which word is the best, the most woke word or whatever. And I just don't think that serves us as a movement, and I also think that that's very colonial. That's the English language telling us to define things, categorize things, and rank things, and that we need to get out of that way of thinking. But also, so I would say I would, support that term, not knowing much, support this idea of womanism, not knowing much more than what I just recently read about it. And I think it goes back to what, I forget which panelist said it, but or maybe multiple did. It goes back to women being able to choose for themselves what empowers them, and so that might be more quote unquote traditional roles of women in the mainstream sense or not, and I think we have to allow that diversity. I think my initial thought too is that the word womanism really seems to exclude the variety of genders. And I would feel that Indigenous feminism, grassroots feminism, Black feminism recognizes all of those different genders and empowers all of those different genders as well. So just some initial thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Jahan. No, I saw a lot of heads nodding on our panel. So unless somebody else really wants to get in there, I might jump to the next question. So the next question that I see on here is Melody Lopez asks, I would like to know how Indigenous feminism intersects with not falling into lateral violence against each other. Ooh, she's bringing up lateral violence. Yes, yes, right. We know this is one we've got to talk about. Who's ready? I know Jahan wants to jump in there, but she's trying to do the whole, she's trying to wait. She's trying to be respectful. But I think you might just want to go, Jahan.
Okay, I'm quick on my feet. I'm quick on my feet. Okay. Oh, I think that's like the main thing that upholds patriarchy is women reinforcing patriarchy on each other, you know? And I think it's just like a continuation of divide and conquer, you know? Like, so I think we really need to reject and call out. I think that's one thing that we don't do. We whisper to each other, oh my gosh, I can't believe, blah, blah, but we don't, and not to like say the call out culture, but address it, you know? So we really need to address every time we see someone in our communities being like, oh, traditional women wear long skirts. Oh my gosh, that girl is wearing a short skirt, or oh, she must be from Phoenix because, you know, she's dressed in this way, or, you know, just like all the time you see it on Facebook memes and people laughing about it, you know what I mean? And I'm the person who will ruin your good time. No, I'm just kidding. So I think that's wrong, you know? So I think we just have to get so much better at that. And I think there's also just not a lot of spaces for women to come together and talk about these things, period. And so then the Indigenous Feminist Organizing School that we put on, I mean, that's what everybody appreciated most about it. Sure, a lot of women come together, but we talk about how to stop this coal mine, how to like address this issue with water, you know, what to do at the school board. We don't talk about women to women, you know, what are the issues that we are facing, like, you know, and we support each other, I think, give each other a knowing look in those spaces where, you know, some Indian man is like, you know, bloody blying, you know, not saying anything, talking a lot. We can look at each other and roll our eyes, you know, and we have that support system, but I don't think we've had the space to get together, discuss things in depth and in a political way to make the personal political. That's something that I feel like I've really learned too, is like, you know, these can't just be one-on-one discussions, but we need to address it as a larger group of Indigenous women and call these things out.
Thanks, Jahan. Yeah, and I see Sandra's hand raised, and I don't know if did Linda, did you raise your hand? Oh, okay, Sandra.
Thank you very much. I do think that this is one of the elements that we have to remember, that feminism allows us to know that we have to de-learn. We have to, this is a process of learning by unlearning. We all living in a system that is racist, there is discrimination, there is lesbo phobias against trans and lesbian women, and the system wants to divide us. And that's the idea of the system, that we don't get together. So this is why it is so powerful to have women's groups that, or people of gender non-conforming, or the gender diversity, so they can unlearn what is dividing us, because that message is still with us. And the fights among women, it's part of the system, and it's part of the mandate of the system, because the system wants us at home alone, and there is competitiveness that is horrible. So this is part of our political commitment, to actually unlearn this and to find ways and to politicize the actions that want to divide us. And we should not be fighting against each other, but against the idea of the system, and try to discover it. So we can't, you know, punish ourselves, or we wish, because we're fighting among each other. We need to really analyze why that this is what we have learned in the system that is oppressing us, and it's the system that is trying us to get us to maintain the same system. So feminism allows us to discover this and to unlearn. But this is a process. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. So there's a number of questions coming in. Of course, they wait till the end here, but and we're getting closer to the end. So I do want to ask folks to say, I'll give you some time to say some closing thoughts, but I'll tell you the questions too that came in case you want to include those, right? So one of the questions is, from your perspective, right, as Indigenous women, if somebody was able to speak to trans rights from an Indigenous feminist perspective, right? I think some people had mentioned a little bit that might have touched on that. The other question is, it's a big one. What needs to happen to change these systems? What needs to happen systemically to really build towards the matriarchal society that we envision, right? So maybe I'm going to ask you to do 1 minute kind of summary each of either your closing thoughts on any of those. And Akpik, maybe you want to go first since you didn't get a chance to speak.
I look super perplexed on what to say. Oh man, so much is going through my mind. And yes to all of what Jihan and Sandra replied so far on the other questions. So I want to also just reinforce, like going back to the question about womanism, that was the first thing that came to mind, and this helps answer the questions about trans rights. My biggest flag, I guess, with the idea of womanism was just, you know, not getting caught up on language, but making sure it's inclusive of all genders, the spectrum of genders, non-binary and trans people. And so that helps, you know, hopefully answer the question that we had in the former one on womanism. And I guess if I had to, any lingering thoughts on sharing, you know, I think Indigenous feminism very much stands out because it's contextualized within our work towards sovereignty, and it is our sovereignty. And that's very different than some other forms of feminism that arose out of civil rights. That's a huge difference, actually, that I think really stands out for Indigenous feminism, is the aspect of sovereignty and our living and practicing of sovereign ways of being. And then grown off of that idea, I'm a really big advocate for all spectrums of genders and also the healing and growth for our men. I think that it would be so short-sighted to not include our men in a conversation like this, and to try to understand and push ourselves to know what that balance of relationship looks like across all the spectrums of gender. And so those are kind of the two last things that I could hopefully drop seeds on. And yeah, I just, Koyana, thank you so much for the opportunity to share my minute.
Koyana Akpik, who's unmuted, who's ready to go? Linda or Jahan? Linda? Okay.
I can. So I just wanted to thank everyone for coming on tonight and for this unbelievable conversation. I just felt like so incredibly honored to be on with you all, and just in awe of all of you guys, my sisters. I just send so much love to you. I just want to, I think, reinforce a little bit of what was said, in that we can't have these conversations without thinking about healing, I think, for men as well, and those who identify as men. You know, I will tell you that I have interviewed for papers that I've written a lot of men who were identified as abusive, and almost all of them told me that they were raised to believe that women were sacred. That they would actually say that women were sacred. They would verbalize that. And yet they were physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually abusive. So, you know, there's a disconnect between, you know, women and the feminine, and trans women, and those who identify as women. There's a disconnect between them being sacred and them being treated well. So, and treated with respect and dignity. So I just wanted to say that, and maybe that answers someone's question. And I wanted to just say thanks again for having me on. We'll be back.
Thank you, Linda.
I can go. Oh man. I feel like around the issue of like the diversity of genders and indigenous cultures, I feel like that's a huge like conversation that needs to be had, starting with people who identify as those things. You know what I mean? Like I can't say like, well, I think this. You know, I'm a cis woman, and but I feel like um, what I see, you know, in movement building work is that a lot of that conversation is dominated more by mainstream feminism, mainstream like LGBTQIA rights advocates. And I think similarly, there's a lot of the indigenous perspective missing, you know, so I just am a high advocate that needs to happen. And then in terms of what needs to happen to change our society, oh my gosh. Well, I do think, I mean, I'm going to say again, I think women need our own spaces to discuss these things without worrying about everybody else. So yes, we're going to, we know men need help too. We know other people need help too. But I feel like our first reaction always to be like, but not just us, let like everything else. And I feel like there also needs to be a starting point of, can we just talk amongst us? Do you know what I mean? And I also feel like there's an outside demand that women's spaces incorporate everybody. Like it's like we can't ever be alone. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I like, let's say at a UN meeting and the men's caucus and the women's caucus, like everybody comes to be included in the women's caucus, not the men's caucus. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like, you know, and like we also need our own spaces, I think, in addition to everything else that we're trying to do. And then the last thing that I would say is I think one major thing we could do to change society is that women's work and reproductive labor needs to be paid, because it paid at its actual value. So let's say your man goes off to work, his company better pay for all the work that his wife is doing at home too, because to me, like that's how capitalism started, is a huge amount of work is being done for free by women, because that's natural for us. And I think that's how that whole subsidy towards capitalism began. So I feel like I'm not just saying to say like we should all be capitalists, but if that was actually paid its value, which maybe more of us are experiencing during COVID and understanding, that could make a huge change in a lot of things.
Ooh.
Thank you, everybody. Everybody's awesome. Thank you for inviting me.
Sandra.
So I want to say that I'm very thankful for sharing this space, because we're learning so much from each other. And the other thing is something that we share with the community, the trans community and the LGBTIQ, is that the right to exist, the struggle for existing, for being who we are, to flourish the way that we are, to make our own decisions, from our right to decide about ourselves, which is the exercising of sovereignty. And on the other hand, what is it that we are proposing? And I have always said that Indigenous peoples have always spoken, but they have not been heard. Why? Because there are several statements actually that come from centuries past, where we were calling for the no destruction of Mother Earth, that were never heard. The interest was not there. The people who were doing nation building based on their own interest, they were not listening. So the Mayan people in Guatemala have always said, the future already passed. That's what it means. that the proposal is the good, living well, buen vivir, what we call it. The proposal has already existed for a long time. It is the recovering of the ancestral knowledge and wisdom are organized in forms which are based on the community, the reorganization of the community roles where we did have a key role for the protection of the collectivity, and all the people who were part of that family and community, they did have a role that they have to fulfill. And that included culture, music, healing, organization, leadership. That's where the future is. The future of the planet. So finally the planet can regenerate itself and we can keep going. So the proposal is already there. And it is the recovery of what we already lived, the recovery of what is in the collective mind, the collective memory. It's already there. So our task is recovering those things. Thank you so much.
Gracias, Sandra. Wow. I have pages and pages of notes that I was going to try to summarize, but I think the audience can kind of get a glimpse at just the amount that there is to discuss when we're talking about Indigenous feminisms. And I'm so thankful that IEN, Indigenous Environmental Network, will be hosting a series of these discussions. So I know there might have been other questions in the chat. Tune in, because I believe IEN will be going more deeply into these different topic areas. But as a means of just quickly summarizing, like in my little 1 minute here, much gratitude to the wisdom that was shared by you all. But what Sandra said there at the end of, the future has already passed. What we've been saying up here in Alaska, we've been using the term remembering forward, right? And so much I feel like of what you all said was this understanding that our traditional practices, our ceremonial practices, are the fabric, in Sandra's case, she talked very literally about the fabric, right, being the woven, our cosmologies being woven into those fabrics, and those are really key pieces of Indigenous feminism. We talked about the imposition of colonialism and capitalism, and I'm sure we all wanted to dive a little more deeply into that feminism, feminist economy talk. We talked about lateral violence. We talked about unlearning. We talked about community care and self-care. We talked about what that S of feminisms means, and really there's a diversity of it, just as we recognize a diversity of genders. And really what I kind of came away from what you all said was a lot of hearing about balance, right? Indigenous feminisms is really about bringing us back into balance with each other, our relationships as women or other genders, or with men, our relationships to Mother Earth and to all the other living beings. And so, Kuyana, gracias. Thank you all for this time. I'll pass it back to Benishi. Shoot, I went over, sorry.
Sorry, no, that's okay. We're in the right time. We're doing the right thing. So, I just wanted to remind folks, like, part of what Ine just summarized for us is that, like, there's no way we can unpack this discussion in an hour and a half. There's no way we could unpack this discussion in a week. Even if we spent a week going 24/7 talking about this, we would still not unpack it. So that's the intention for us around having a series of these discussions. And the next one is going to be on the new moon, August 18th. And we're going to try to keep that schedule of the new moon and honoring that moon space. And the next discussion we'll figure out a title for it, but it's going to be around this idea of two-spirit, gender, and some of the things, some of the questions that people brought up that we'll have. And some of these are going to continue to be discussions, and we'll have a series of these coming up. And by all means, share some suggestions and ideas. It doesn't mean I'll like be able to like create a webinar for every question that people bring up, but just share some ideas, and we're open to that. And so I'm going to pass on to Simone.
No, I don't really have anything to add except for just to thank everyone so much. And as Benishi said, this was our kickoff. It was just a conversation a couple weeks ago, and our panelists graciously, nimbly agreed to participate. And we'll be having these conversations, and they might be back with us again. We hope that they all will be in different forms to go deeper, because there's a lot of knowledge, wisdom, insightfulness, and experience sitting right here. So thank you all so much, and we hope that we will see you the next time. Thank you.